restorative justice is good when there are people that are up for that. So, for example, say that a person shot up their block and killed somebody. The family of the victim may not have gotten over it, even though the individual that actually did the harm may have had a come to Jesus moment. They feel like, return to the victims, or I want to return to my community, and expect the community to accept them wholeheartedly. You might have a victim's brother, a cousin, an aunt, a sister that might not have gotten over the fact that you killed their relative. And I think it's more damaging to go into that community, expect them to accept you because you had a change of heart. Right? You might be re-traumatizing them again and again and again just by your presence being there and knowing that you had killed somebody that was close to them, or knowing that you shot up the block. Somebody might be scarred for life because of it, and you might not have killed somebody, but you might have caused irreparable damages, irreparable trauma. I think that the Cure Violence movement puts the community at harm when they're saying the only time you're credible is when you go back into the community that you've harmed. And I had that disagreement with the guy that was teaching me about Cure Violence and credible messenger work and restorative justice. In my humble opinion, you still are credible if you have the skills of mentoring and you go into another community that's dealing with the same issues, the same problems, but you haven't directly harmed that community. You still have the skills of mentoring. You still are credible in the fact that you've lived that lifestyle. You can relate to that lifestyle, so the people from that community can relate to you because you are from that cloth. However, I think it's absurd to ask, and it's also absurd to me to go and do hospital intervention. Now, somebody just got shot up, is almost dead, and while they are being cared for in the hospital, these so-called credible messengers are going to the hospital to tell them and their families not to retaliate. First of all, it's too new. The pain is too raw. And to me, that's a violation. Now, maybe after, when they're doing some type of aftercare or something like that, where the pain is not so fresh, or it's not instant, that they do that they go and they provide services and then they speak to them about not retaliating. That is understandable. I think that that's putting a lot of people in harm's way when they're doing that. And definitely when they're saying, unless you go back into the community that you've harmed, you're credible. That is not a fact. It's not a fact proven, because I've mentored young men as a credible messenger in the Bronx, whereas my crimes, when it pertained to violence, happened on Rikers Island, and it happened in Harlem. So these people that I was mentoring were from the Bronx, but they still related to my experience and I still was able to reach them without harming the community more so than I had already done. I think that we need to broaden our perspective in that light. One of the things that I've came to the conclusion in my experience as mentoring is that it's not about your credibility on the street as much as it is you having the skills or knowing how to mentor a young person that is in the street. And that's one of the things that the at-risk movement does. We provide the skill sets that we have obtained through experience with mentoring young people. And we put that into our manuals, into our textbooks, into our facilitators' guides. Because mentoring somebody from the street, it takes more than you just glorifying your past of when you actually was harming the street. A lot of the times I've observed other mentors glorify the harm that they did, or the people that they know in the streets that's still in the street, and they're mentioning these names to gain favor with the young people. And the young people, they do respond to that, right? They do be like, oh, word, you know, such and such, such and such. But it gets them deeper into accepting that behavior. And that's counterproductive to what we're trying to do. We're trying to redirect that behavior, redirect that mindset. So in glorifying, you know, people that's still active and doing street crime, people that's still in gangs and harming the community, and it does more harm than good, because now they're still looking up to those peoples and individuals and behaviors that we are trying to redirect them from. You know, when you are a credible messenger, you need to be aware of that. Or when you an organization that utilizes credible messengers, you need to be aware that that also can harm the community more so than it helps. So I'm J.S. Brooks of the at-risk movement, and that's my little 2 cents on the difference between being a community messenger and being a credible messenger. And I approve this message. Peace and blessings. 1.